Hello, my loves, and welcome back to the Love and Science podcast. I am coming to you today from my living room. It's actually the eve of the Epiphany, which is also the date of the launch of my course, Thriving Through Infertility. I cannot even begin to tell you how excited I am that this resource is now available. So many people are going to benefit. Basically, when I formed Love and Science, I thought to myself, I think people need a course, right? I think people need some guideposts. I've been doing this a really long time now, and there are certain themes that come up over and over and over again. And so I started to record. I started to record videos. I started to ask my people what they wanted to hear about. And I really started to say, okay, what would be the most high yield way for my people to learn, to transform, to really engage with the material so that they can become a different version of themselves? I'll tell you that, I've been doing this a really long time. And when people are able to connect their minds and their bodies, when they are able to calm the nervous system, to understand their why, to feel their feelings, to hold on to what I call authentic hope, which is hope grounded in science. When people are able to start to do that and then ask themselves the hard questions, that's really when the transformation begins. And so I have created a step by step guide, right? It is a 12 module course, which means my recommendation is to do one module a week and really work with it, right? I always say to my people, figure out when you're going to do this. I would set aside at least an hour to an hour and a half a week, which again, some people do more, some people do less, but really to carve out that time for you, for your transformation, for your investment in yourself. Because if you're like me, the best money I have ever spent has been on coaching programs. And like I always say, what you get out of it is going to be proportional to what you put in. And the structure is there for massive transformation and massive results. So, why did I do this? I did this because my people were suffering in silence. I started practicing about a decade ago on my own, well, in the context of an academic environment. And I just remember day after day giving people the latest data, giving people my utmost compassion and empathy as I bring to every single day. And there was something about the conversation where I knew I was not reaching people. And that was incredibly frustrating for me, right? I was like, these are smart, talented, beautiful women. And what I'm saying is not sinking in. And I think it's because infertility takes so much, right? It takes a person's dignity. It makes people anxious. It makes people overwhelmed and unable to absorb information. And so, what I wanted to do was to say, okay, what's actually going to work for my people? And that's when I started creating, right? I started recording videos. You should see my notebooks. I have so many mock ups of like, maybe this will work, maybe that will work, maybe this will work. And ultimately, it was the coaching tools that I found most valuable in terms of helping people to get through their journeys. And so I started to record the top 12 topics that seem to come up the most in my REI practice. And not just the most common topics, but the actionable tools where I was seeing transformations already in my patients that I knew that people needed to have, right? I knew that millions actually of women are suffering in silence right now. And there is now a resource, which is my course, that will guide people through the steps of how to, calm the nervous system, connect with the deepest why, trust the process, and ultimately be successful. So, who is this for? This course is for any high achieving person, right? Women specifically, who are interested in growth, who are interested in transformation, who are interested in next year being in a different place on their fertility journey than they are today, right? It's the beginning of January. We're thinking about transformations. And when I look at my journals, I want to see that in a year I've made progress. I don't want to see the same thing week after week, month after month, right? That's very sad to me, right? I want to be growing, I want to be changing. And when I created this course, I wanted to reach as many people as possible. And I wanted to have an impact where every single person who engages with this material can say, I'm a better person for it. I'm a more empowered person for it. I found my voice. My fertility treatments are working, right? All these things. Like that is my goal, is that people can overcome where they've been stuck, that they can engage with the content, and they can take these tools not just to their fertility journeys, but to other aspects of their life, like their work, their relationships, and ultimately parenting, right? That's the goal, is to have children. Ultimately parenting to improve everything with the next generation, right? We always say we build on the previous generations, and that's what we're trying to do here. So, what else is amazing about this course? Well, after a long time and finally finding the right team and the right group, I was able to secure 18 CME credits for this course, which is amazing. The last conference I went to, which is a 3-day conference, had like a third of that, right? And so if you're like me and you need to submit your CME every time you're renewing a license or maybe applying for a new license, CMEs can be very expensive and they can be really hard to get. But I have included that in this course so that when you do the 12-week course and you pass a quiz at the end, which if you're at all paying attention during the course, you will pass the quiz. You will be able to get 18 CME credits. And if you have professional development funds, you may apply those, ask your institution to cover the cost of this course because it is continuing medical education. Now, yes, this is continuing medical education for physicians, but it's also for anybody else in health allied fields who needs continuing education. So, occupational therapists, PAs, NPs, dentists, you name it. I wanted to make it as inclusive as possible because we know when we spend all of our days caring for other people, it can be really hard to care for ourselves. And I wanted to give people the resources to be able to do that in a way that also got them CME credits and also in a way where they were able to, get some funds from their institutions to support their journeys. Because, hey, let's be honest, when we are well humans, we also show up at work a different version of ourselves, a better version of ourselves. So it's a win-win-win all the way around. Okay, so let's talk about what the content of this course is. So, if you've ever hopped on a call with me, you know that we always start with our deepest why. What is the deepest why? The deepest why is why we are on the fertility journey in the first place, right? So it relates to why we're still on the path, because if you look at a piece of paper and you look at your journey, other people might have tailed off by now. And so you're here for a reason, right? The desire is in your heart for a child for a reason. And so once we can figure out what that reason is, that becomes the motivation as the times get tough, as the roller coaster happens, right? There's always going to be some combination of good news and disappointing news. And so, really, really honing in on that deepest why and our values and our identity, that is the foundation for what we do. And then I teach you how to feel your feelings. If you're like 99% of the population or maybe more, you've never been taught how to feel your feelings. It can be uncomfortable at first, but that's why I'm your guide. And I will help you, right? Like I said, there's worksheets and there's homework and there's all sorts of interactive exercises to be able to check in several times a day if you wish, right? And to really try out how to sit with discomfort, how to process feelings, and how to become a more evolved version of yourself. I always say the only way to get to the other side is through the feelings. And so the more comfortable we can get with processing emotions, we realize they actually don't take that long to process. They often will even teach us something, right? I think of them as data. And then we can come out on the other side with that feeling let go of and kind of more in control of our experience. And, I think the goal of all this is not to become these like robots, but it really is to become the most evolved version of ourselves, right? And if I can learn how to process sadness, grief, disappointment, fear, anxiety, hope, gratitude, love, all those things, that if I can hold them in my body and then let them go, then I can really handle anything, right? So that's what we do, is we calm the nervous system with that safety, and then we feel the feelings, and then we start to look at the mindful self-compassion piece of things, which is so important to everything, and also the authentic hope, which is, why does it make sense for you to keep on your journey, right? Like I said, other people might have given up by now, but you're here for a reason. And so why does it make sense for you in particular to say, yes, it makes sense to keep going? So then we then turn our attention to other aspects that I found are particularly valuable for high achieving women on this pathway. So sometimes it's setting boundaries. So we have a whole module on boundaries. Other times it's learning how to fill our well, because if we are truly going on empty, it is really impossible to do this work. It can take so much. We have to make sure we're filling the tank, and I teach you how to do that. I also talk about dealing with bad news. That's something that comes up very often in the coaching, calls that I do, because, we always hope for the good news, but sometimes if there's disappointing news, we can feel very blindsided. So that's really important. Another really important module is balancing trust and advocacy, especially if you're in medicine, but really for anybody who is on this path. It's always really helpful to know when to speak up, when to trust the process, and which questions to ask specifically for you on your journey that will help you understand, is this the right fit? Maybe you need a second opinion, maybe not, but I've really come up with a very useful scheme to balance trust and advocacy, which, like I said, easier said than done. Sometimes it's hard to turn off the clinician brain, but we can do it. And, I have a roadmap to do that. Um, Waiting for the pregnancy test is another really important module. And we all know that that 9-10 days can feel like forever. And so I give you my best strategies for how to pass the time, both with intentional distractions and also processing feelings as needed to get you to that pregnancy test, because that's such an important time. Also, gratitude. I think that the longer I live, the more and more I realize that gratitude is just so important for our brain chemistry. It's really, really interesting how when we start to be grateful, it's almost like it's hard to turn it off, because our brains are then primed to look for what's actually going well. So I have a gratitude practice with my very good friend, Dr. Jenny. She's an OBGYN. We have done this, gosh, I'd have to go back, but I think since 2018, we started this gratitude practice, sharing 3 gratitudes a day. But sometimes I can't stop at 3. Sometimes I have to keep going. And sometimes that's even in the middle of a really, really crappy day, a really horrible day. But I think if we can really look and say, okay, what am I grateful for, and savor that in our bodies, that's when we start to look at what actually is going well. The people in our lives, the love, the support, the teams, all those things, and not in a Pollyanna way at all. If you know me at all, I'm not about platitudes. I'm not about anything that's false or toxic positivity, but in a very deep, grounded, I would say spiritual way of acknowledging the good. And that then, in a very beautiful way, encourages us not just to see more good, but to receive more good. It's really, really important to do that. Um, Triggers is another really important topic. And so I created a whole module on that, how to navigate family functions, the holidays, being in public, seeing pregnant people, all of those things. We go through my system of trigger prevention, processing, and then also the post trigger analysis, so that we can really heal from the inside out, so that the same stimulus does not cause the same effect over time. And then values based decisions. Oh my goodness. Again, part of my motivation for creating Love and Science and for creating this course was because a lot of my patients were like really struggling to make empowered choices, right? I remember being like, okay, so we can do more IUI cycles, we can do IVF. These are the pros and cons of both. And, we just get into this rumination loop, this analysis paralysis that's just so very hard to break. And so, I think part of what keeps us from making empowered choices is that we have limiting beliefs we may not even know about. So, what I do is I help you to uncover limiting beliefs that you may have to help you make the most empowered, confident choices about your fertility journey. And then lastly, finding your tribe, right? We are so isolated. I would say, especially with the rise of social media, especially with COVID, when we really truly had to be isolated. I think a lot of us, especially if you're in your late 30s and 40s, or maybe you've had a medical career and you've moved every 3 to 4 years for the last decade or, 15 years, it can be really, really hard to find your tribe of people who care, of people who understand. And so I, based on the literature that social connectedness is so important, I created my best strategy for finding your tribe, finding people who understand you, who don't judge you, and who lift you up and help you to navigate this process with love and support and community. So, as a bonus as well, so those are my 12 modules, right? So, your why, your values, your identity, that's the first one. Feeling your feelings is the second one. Authentic hope and mindful self compassion is the third. Filling your well is the fourth. Dealing with bad news is the fifth. Balancing trust and advocacy is the sixth. The seventh one is boundaries. The eighth is waiting for the pregnancy test. The ninth one is gratitude. The 10th is handling triggers. The 11th is decisions, moving beyond limiting beliefs. And the 12th is finding your tribe. Now, I have learned from my people over the last couple of years that at Love and Science, we really have to lean into the science. And as a practicing REI, there is so much science that is coming out all the time, right? I make a point to go to the American Society of Reproductive Medicine annual meeting. I follow several boards online where people talk about hard cases. I am intimately involved with the fellowship program where I practice at my current university, and we are always doing journal clubs and reading papers. And my idea of a fun day sometimes is to hole up with a bunch of articles in PubMed and to make sense of these really hard clinical questions. And I mean that sincerely. I really do get excited about the science because what I know is that when we can lean into the science, when we can understand what it's actually saying, that's when people's journeys can be transformed. And I take it very seriously that it's my job to translate that to people, whether you're in medicine or not, right? To be able to understand the studies and your particular situation and how you might benefit from the science in 2025. I mean, we really have come so far. But I do think that sometimes that tailored approach can be missing. And so, what I have done is I have added my most popular webinars and podcasts on my most quote unquote sciencey topics, which range from things like why are my high quality embryos not taking and IVF adjuncts, right? Because it's like, should I add this? Should I add that? Should I take this away? All those things. And I really go through the science and the data about, why we do what we do and then what's on the forefront of care so that we're always on the cutting edge of the latest science and technology to give you the best chance of a successful outcome. So, with that, I am launching this course. I am so incredibly excited that it's available as a resource as of today, January 6th, 2026. It's a very valuable, wisdom packed, experience packed course with the worksheets that I've created and tailored specifically to you. I've brought in all the resources that I know of to help people during these very crucial parts of the journey. And the feedback I've gotten so far has been absolutely amazing in terms of people feeling more grounded, more empowered, finding their voice, asking more high level questions, starting to enjoy life outside of the fertility journey. I mean, it's just been amazing to hear how people are really resonating with this content. So please do get your course today. If you are in a medicine allied field, 18 CME credits, and also, the opportunity if your institution has funds to be fully reimbursed for the course. So I will end this podcast as I end all of my meetings and my podcasts because my motivation is that I love you dearly. And I believe that every single person who wants to have a child deserves to have a child. That desire is in your heart for a reason. And there is a way. We just don't know how that little soul is going to come to you yet, but there is a way. And so I do love you dearly. I believe in you. I believe that there's authentic hope for every single person on this journey. And sometimes we just need to find it. Sometimes we just need the right guide. So we will have the links right in the show notes. We will make sure that all over social media, you know exactly how to get this course. But I am incredibly proud of it. I'm incredibly excited that so many people are going to benefit. And I cannot wait to hear the feedback once you start engaging because it's my best stuff, right? I've been doing this for over a decade. It's everything I've got and then some. And I cannot wait to hear how it's transforming you in your journey. So until the next time, I love you. Bye.